Director Griffin here, and today we are doing a tier maker video covering Imperial command cards for Star Wars Legion. I'd like to start this video by briefly discussing some lessons learned from the previous video and kind of how we're going to format this going forward. I'm told that quite a few people actually listen to these videos versus watching them, so I am going to actually give a description of every card as I go through them. That will extend the length of the video. If you find this to be too long, the eventual master video will have no readings in it. It'll just be me organizing my thoughts and proceeding from there. Also, I intended to put out this video several weeks back. Unfortunately, due to LVO and some personal concerns, I had to delay the video for some time in order to do proper editing and make sure the production value is at least up to semi-par. As a result of that, I am going to be releasing almost all of the videos within the next week for the Tier Maker series, at least the Command Hand series, as well as a special bonus video that I hinted at previously. So look forward to that, please. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. So our first card is Covert Observation. Now, Covert Observation says when an opponent is issuing orders using a command card, each unit that is issued an order with that command card gets a suppression token. It issues an order to an operative or a special forces unit. I'm going to put this at B tier. It's slightly better than ambush. Suppression, unfortunately, just isn't that good right now, and since it's restricted to only orders issued by a command card, it's not amazing. I have seen niche cases where somebody uses like Bosk, they put suppression on an enemy character and knowing full well that that person's going to play a 1-pip next turn, and that just tosses on the extra suppression needed to potentially suppress them out. It's fine. You can definitely drop it for ambush if you don't have a good operative or special forces in your list. I think that's completely fair. Next up is Pinned Down. Now, Pinned Down is when after a friendly supporter heavy performs an attack against a unit with a face-up order token, you return that token to the stack, basically. So this is, I'm going to say, a gimmick tier card. It's really good, but it does require that you bring supports and or heavies, and also that your opponent kind of relies on having face-up orders. Now, this game is all about face-up orders, don't get me wrong. I would say this is arguably one of the best gimmick tier cards there is, but because it's so restrictive in what you can actually take in order to use it, it's just a gimmick card. It's really good, but it's still a gimmick. Third of the Imperial generics is Coordinated Fire. After a friendly core unit performs a ranged attack, if it spent at least one aim token, an allied friendly unit within range 1 to 2 gains an aim token. This is, again, gimmick tier. It relies heavily on you wanting to build a core-focused list. Now, this was an amazingly good card for a very long time in the early game of Empire. And Shorelines can still use it, but a lot of Empire lists just aren't running strong core, and as a result of that, I don't think this card is particularly better than Assault unless you have that core focus. So, we're going to move on to the big daddy himself, Darth Vader, starting off with Implacable. Implacable is going up to S tier. Now, what Implacable says is when Darth Vader is issued an order, or when he activates, he gains a dodge token. At the end of his first activation, he may suffer 1 wound to put his token back into the order pool. And in his second activation, he takes 1 less action. Previously, this card did not give dodge tokens, and I would have put it at A tier because it was a weaker Son of Skywalker. Now that Vader has kind of that extra sustainability with getting 2 free dodges, he also gets his Master of the Force trigger, which is pretty important, so he can do like double pushes and double chokes, which is really strong. It just makes him really, really good. The only downside is if you have a big order pool, you might have some awkward timing on when he comes out. This card is really good, though, on, like, Operative Vader if he has Into the Fray, because you don't necessarily care when he goes, if he's already in the middle of the enemy lines, because he's getting surge tokens. So the dodges plus the surges just makes him super tanky. So definitely an S tier card. The changes definitely brought it up to Son of Skywalker levels. I would have liked to see the order just get reissued to him, but they chose to give him dodges instead. I think that's a legitimate choice. Next up is Vader's Might. Vader's Might is also going into S tier. Now, Vader's Might says you get a free action. Choose another non-heavy vehicle at range, or non-heavy unit at range 1, and place that unit on the battlefield within range 1 and height 1 of its current position. Then, if it's an enemy unit, you roll a white die for each model in the unit. It suffers 1 wound for each, basically, paint result. This card is really, really good. Even if you think of it as like a free, longer ranged Force Push, that's legitimately awesome. Force Push is just such a ubiquitous card in this game that I think a lot of people would agree that having an extra Force Push is really good. And Vader actually gets 2, basically. 1 from his Implacable Trigger and 1 from his Vader's Might. So he has a ton of ability to reposition enemy minis around the table. And he can do really nasty things like putting, creature troopers on top of buildings where they can't move. Throwing large units with, good saves is actually amazing for him because they're taking those white saves instead of their normal saves. One of the worst rollouts I've ever seen, he used Vader's Might on a unit of Death Troopers, and they rolled like 3 paint out of their 5. And it was like, oh, that hurts. Then he choked another guy, and the unit was basically gone. So, just a very, very strong card overall. New ways to motivate them, I am going to put at A tier. Now, this might be tough for some people. I'm going to read the description of the card, and then I'll explain why I don't think it's gimmick tier, though some people will disagree. Vader's Might says, when a friendly non-Darth Vader trooper unit activates, it may suffer 1 wound to perform 1 free action. Now, people use this with dewbacks, people use this with Imperial Royal Guard, and that's very gimmicky. But I have seen this card used at like the end of a game to give a unit basically a triple move. Their triple moves are so strong that Maul had to be specifically prevented from doing it with Juyo. That, the fact that Vader can give anybody a triple move, well, yeah, they'll take some damage to do it, is insanely good. I've also seen it used with, like, Bossk, because Bossk just doesn't care about the free wound. There's enough units that can really benefit from new ways, and enough situations where just having a new ways available can win you games. It's an A tier card, in my opinion. Next up is Fear and Dead Men. Fear and Dead Men is also going into A tier. Now, Fear and Dead Men is a little bit weird to read. I'm going to read the description, then I'm going to explain what it actually does. When Darth Vader uses Deflect, the attacker suffers 1 wound for each blank result instead of each surge result. When an enemy unit within range 1 and 2 in line of sight of Darth Vader activates, he gains a dodge token. So basically, the second part's the easiest part. He gets a bunch of dodges. It makes him super tanky. What this translates to with Fear and Dead Men is that Vader basically, whenever he's using a deflect move, he just gets a straight up 3-up save, and if he takes damage, the enemy takes damage. That's just how it essentially doubles his chance of reflecting attacks back. Really, really strong if you know your opponent's going to try to focus down Vader. It doesn't make him quite as tanky as, say, like, Full of Surprises does if Luke's only getting shot once, but Vader with, Fear and Dead Men wants to get shot a bunch. It really creates an unfortunate circumstance for your opponent to be like, I don't think I want to shoot him, but the longer they don't shoot him, the more dodges he gets. It's just brutal. Next up is Master of Evil. Master of Evil is going into A tier. I know, surprising. Vader's just coming out with all these A tier cards now. I would not have put these here, just a little while ago, right? Pre-errata, I would have put a lot of these at B and C tier because Vader was just struggling so much. Master of Evil says that when Darth Vader is issued an order, he gains a dodge token, and then when he activates, everybody within range 1 to 2 of him, every enemy unit within range 1 to 2 of him, gets 3 suppression tokens. Suppression is good against some factions and not so good against others. But 3 suppression is kind of beyond that point of like, oh, I can just ignore that. a lot of times we talk about, like, most armies, say for example droids ignore suppression, clones ignored suppression for a while, and even rebels ignore suppression to a certain extent in a lot of cases, but they ignore, like, oh, they took one suppression, cool, they just ignore that kind of, or oh, they took two, they'll probably roll off one and still get to go. Vader tosses out three. Three is beyond the suppressed point of most models, so really the only army that's actually going to be able to safely ignore a Master of Evil is a Commander Vader army, because they can just compel, or droids. And so it's just a really, really, really good thing to do. It's also, 3 suppression is also the courage of most Jedi, for what it's worth. So playing this in response to somebody coming out with like a really strong 1-pip is actually really good. I've also seen it used once where somebody didn't realize that suppression turns off standby, so they 1-pipped with Obi-Wan, chose to take a standby and a bunch of dodges, and Vader activated and was like, and your standby goes away. So really, really good card overall. It's got a lot of usage. It also it gives out pre-orders. It's strictly better than Assault in most cases with Vader. Last but not least is Darkness Descends. This card would have been gimmick tier before the errata, and now it is S tier because it gives reliable too. I don't think anyone is using it to infiltrate at all, because Vader just getting 2 free search tokens every turn is super good. If he's not going in for the attack, it just makes him extraordinarily tanky. And if he is going in for the attack, it makes his attacks much more consistent, which is something that the Dark Lord of the Sith desperately needed. So to read what the card does, it has a permanent effect. If this card was not divulged, Darth Vader gains a reliable 2. And its divulge effect is that he gets Infiltrate and Scout 1 and may be deployed at the end of setup. So he basically gains reinforcements as well. I'm actually not sure how the timing effect of that works versus reinforcements. I'd imagine it's technically the same. So they would probably alternate between characters with reinforcements and Vader at that point. So Darth Vader coming in with a really, really strong command suite overall. I would not have put most of these cards here, like I said before, but now there's a reason Operative Vader is so oppressive right now. It's because you can take all 6 of his cards and feel really, really good about them. Now moving on to somebody who we don't necessarily feel so good about anymore is General Veers, coming in with his maximum firepower at B tier. I have long said that General Veers has the weakest bombard in the game. His card simply says at the end of his activation, he may perform an attack with the following profile. Range 4 to unlimited with 4 red. I think it's impact 2. He's got sharpshooter 1. He's gonna probably do 3 hits to something. Woot. It's coordinated bombardment does like 5 to 6. Now that droids have super tacticals with sharpshooter 2, they do 4. The rebel beam one does like 5 to 6. He's just the weakest overall, and it kind of hurts to see that an AT-AT has less firepower than Tauntaun, or the same firepower as Tauntaun pistols, has been the joke for the longest time. So it also suffers from being a 1-pip that you kind of want to play early, and I think, you know, looking back, if they could have swapped this with something else, you know, from a design space standpoint, they probably should have. Next up is Evasive Maneuvers. This is a card that says that when a vehicle is issued an order with this card, it gains a dodge token, it gains outmaneuver. I don't know why they didn't change the text to just say that, because that's what it does. They can dodge crits. So it's going into gimmick. You need vehicles to do it. It's okay, I think. I don't think it's anything amazing. It makes speeder bikes more survivable and ATSTs, but like Empire vehicles are kind of in a rough place right now, and they need a little bit more, and they don't want to be taking Veers anyway because they're so expensive. Last but not least is Imperial Discipline. Now, this may surprise you, but I'm actually going to put this in gimmick tier. Just says that when a unit is issued an order, it recovers this turn. I used to play Upshores and Goat Shores like crazy, and they're really good with this card. Free recovers are pretty okay, but most of the time, the fact that it issues an order to Veers, and Veers does not have anything he wants to recover, just hurts. If this was errated to, say, 3 units, it would just be a better assault and it would go to B tier. Because it has to issue an order to Veers, I absolutely loathe the card with a burning passion because Veers never wants to recover. So I'm putting it under gimmick tier simply because it requires you to have a bunch of things that you want to be able to recover all at once to make it good. Moving on to Boba Fett. Boba Fett is very, very weird to me. I don't understand his design space, and I think his command cards kind of reflect that. He has a bunch of abilities that activate at different ranges, and because he doesn't have a keyword like steady, he can't flit in and out of those ranges to do cool things. If he had steady, or relentless, or whatever that would allow him to move, attack, move, I would probably bump up all of the ratings on these cards. Just keep that in mind. But right now, because he's so awkward to play in a lot of situations, I'm putting these cards where I'm putting them. So first up is Whipcord. Whipcord says Boba may perform, he can perform moves while engaged. He basically gains disengage if a unit that he's engaged with has an immobilized token. Then he has a free action that says choose a unit within range 1 on line of sight. It gains 2 immobilized tokens and 2 suppression. I think it's 2 suppression tokens? 1 suppression token? Something like that. This is a B tier card. It's good. It is really good. It can win games for people, but it's attached to Boba Fett, who doesn't like to get within range 1 of enemies because he tends to get destroyed if he gets too close. So it would be really cool if he could jump in and like whipcord somebody and then jump out. I'd be cool with that, but he can't. And so as a result of that, I think he struggles. Being able to freely disengage is nice. I mean, again, if he lasts into a Jedi, whipcords them, and then backs off, that's great. But it's always like a 50-50 if he's ever going to pull that off, so it's just in most situations, I find. Next up is his ZY flame projector. It's a flame weapon with a 1 red profile. So it's going under C tier. It's really good against droids and other low save units, but again, he has to get in close and he doesn't want to. And so I think it's just not a very good card. It's good if you have like contingencies with Kallus. You can kind of like, oh, I need to use this, and you can like throw it out there. But most of the time, I find it to be very ineffective. Last up is his rocket launcher. Now this I'm gonna put in A tier. It is just a range 2 to 4, 3 red weapon. This is his bounty pickup weapon. You know, you see an opponent who's like, oh, cool, they're at like 2 or 3 health. I'm going to hit him with my rocket, and I'm going to hit him with my gun. It's going to be 3 red, 2 black, range 3, pierce 1. Like, that's his best opportunity to pick up a bounty. And honestly, if he doesn't hit that shot, he's probably not getting his bounty, which is, again, part of his problem. So, it's got a good weapon profile. It's just, you can kind of tell these cards are a little outdated. Because, again, 3 red is just not that impressive these days. I mean, a B2 Ha does that. So, anyway, moving on to Papa Palps. I'm probably going to get some flack for this, but I'm going to put And Now You Will Die at A tier. I'm not giving it an S tier. I think we all know what And Now You Will Die does, but in case you don't, it says during Emperor Palpatine's activation, he may suffer 1 wound and gain 1 suppression to perform an attack. He can do this any number of times. Every time he attacks, and whoever he attacks gains the immobilized token. My primary issue with this card is that it basically means Palpatine dies, and he is feast or famine because of this card. If he takes any damage, this card becomes just exponentially weaker with each point. So I just think that it's really one of those cards that struggles to perform against opponents who get lucky and just hit him for some damage and that he can't shake. And the fact that he basically dies afterwards and gives up 200 plus points, just it hurts. It hurts so bad. So like if he doesn't win you the game with this card, it's game over. So I just can't take it up to an S tier. Next up is actually one of my favorite cards because it was one of the earliest control cards, and I love control in Legion, which is Given to Your Anger. Given to Your Anger has a lot of text, so excuse me if I screw it up like I've screwed up several of these so far. Before an opponent would activate a unit, you basically get to pick what they activate, and if it doesn't attack, it gains 4 suppression. That's really, really good. especially on a 2-pip, because like, oh, cool, your opponent played a 1-pip that's like their big attacking unit, and they need to go right now. You just go like, oh no, go activate that unit that's on your back points that's not going to be able to attack this turn, and they might panic next turn. Have fun with that. Because the suppression comes in at the end of their activation, there's no way to recover it off, there's no way to like dodge away from it. They're going to have to take a check next turn to deal with that suppression. So overall, just a really good control card. And finally, an entire legion. It's going under B tier. It's just a strictly better assault. You just issue orders to everything. All units get an order within range. Like, cool. It's a good card. It's nothing spectacular, but it definitely, in a faction that was as order hungry as Empire is, it's pretty solid. Moving on to Director Krennic, we have Voracious Ambition. I'm going to put Voracious Ambition at A tier, and this is very specifically because Krennic has Cunning, so this is basically a 0-pip, without actually being a 0-pip. It says that at the start of the activation phase, you take 3 tokens out of your stack, basically, and you put them face down on the card. You can look at them at any time, and you can use them at any time. It just gives you nice order control. It's a guaranteed first. You're going to issue an order also to, like, it gives an order to Krennic, and then it also, he's going to probably entourage to a Death Trooper unit that may or may not have comms relayed to give an order to somebody else. So it's like, oh, this person goes for first for free. And then the rest of your turn you have, like, good order control. So it's a good card. Very good. 1-pip overall, I find. Next up is Deploy the Garrison. Deploy the Garrison's text basically says that you get 2 free standby tokens on... you get a free standby token on 2 units that have face-up orders. This is A tier as well. Free standbys, really good. It's the only downside is it's 2 troopers, so like you can't do it to a vehicle, because that would be pretty cool. Like have an ATST in the middle of something and be like, I'm gonna give it a standby. Yeah, so that's the only real like downside to it. Specifically that the standbys have to go to troopers as well. So it's good. It just has some slight restrictions that make it pretty bad. Or make it, I'm sorry, don't make it pretty bad. Make it like, compared to what it could be. Free standbys, like I did with Lando last time, are really good. That was what made Lando's card S tier, but this card, because it has to be troopers, doesn't make it quite as good. Annihilation Looms, I would have put it S tier. I used to think this was an insanely good card, but again, suppression got weak. And guess what faction is weakest to suppression? It's Empire, which puts this card at C tier. Because you're probably going to suffer the effects of suppression more than your opponent will. There are some weird like gimmick plays where like you're playing Commander Vader with Krennic, and so you don't care about suppression, but most of the time you care, and it sucks to have it on you. So I'm sorry, but it goes to C tier in my opinion, which hurts my soul so much, but it is what it is. Moving on to Bosk. We have Merciless... Oh, I didn't say what... I'm sorry. We're not going to go to Bosk. I didn't say what Annihilation Looms does. Annihilation Looms says that every unit gets 1 suppression. If it's turn 5 or 6, every unit gets 2 suppression. It's pretty simple. Now, back to Bosk. Dioxis Mine. Dioxis Mine has a ton of text. Basically, it gives Bosk the ability to lay out a Dioxis charge. That Dioxis charge has 1 red, 1 black, surges to crit. It's a bomb. Every unit it hits automatically gains a poison token. It doesn't have to roll hits. It literally, if they're in range, they get a poison token, which is extremely potent because it's basically guaranteeing auto wounds. Very, very, very strong card. That said, it's a gimmick card. Bosk likes to stay at range. He has a short range bomb that's extremely potent that I almost never see get used. So, yeah, I'm going to put it under gimmick tier. Next up is Reptilian Rampage, which basically says that Bosk can attack twice in a turn. He can also take a wound to make a free move action. This is S tier. As we've talked about before, free attack actions are really good, especially when you are Bosk and have a piercing, suppressive range 4 gun that tends to get a lot of aims. It's very, very good. Same thing with Lying in Wait. Lying in Wait says Bosk gains Sharpshooter 1, and he gets an aim every single time that an opponent activates a unit. People have, at some points, called for this card to be nerfed, because this card basically translates to Bosk gets 5 crits on something. Very, very, very good card. overall. I don't think I need to explain too much why 5 crits with Pierce 1 can just wreck units. Moving on to Iden. Iden's got 4 command cards compared to everyone else's 3, or in Vader's case 6. First up is Pulse Scan. Pulse Scan says that Iden gains Sharpshooter 2 and gains an aim token. And so I'm going to give this one A tier. Iden is strong. This card also gives her a standby and a dodge token after she activates. She's strong, for sure. But she's not Vader hitting, boss hitting strong in general. She can get a double tap off of it because it gives a standby, so she technically can get a second attack off. But it's a big maybe. It's good. It is, but it's not exceptionally insane. You take it most times, but don't expect it to just wreck an entire unit every single game. Next up is Concussive Blast. Concussive Blast just gives her a weapon with the profile of 5, I think it's 5 red, scatter suppressive. I'm going to put this at B tier. It's good. It's a really good card. It just competes with a lot of... Iden tends to be run with other heroes. It tends to compete with a lot of other pretty good tube pips, including the next one we're going to talk about, Incapacitate, which you have to have Dio for, which you should almost always take Dio with Iden. This is going to A tier. It basically says that if Dio is within range 1 of an enemy unit, he can give it 4 suppression. If it's a core, he just immediately flips it, gives it an activated token. Turning off an opponent's activation can be game winning. I can't say much more than that about this ability. It is extremely short range, but Iden is really tanky and doesn't tend to mind getting up close and personal. Yeah, just being able to be like, oh, nope, that core unit you got there, it's not going at all this turn, can just be devastating, especially if it's like a really upgraded core unit. So very, very, very strong card. Last up is Tactical Strike. Now, I should put Tactical Strike under Gimmick because entire lists are built around it, but because entire lists are built around it, it's S tier. Tactical Strike says that every face-up, I believe it is Special Forces unit and Iden, basically, can drop their speed to 1, and they gain Steady and Tactical 1. So they can strafe out of cover, take an aim shot, strafe back into cover, and not get shot in return. They can double move with an aim and shoot. The possibilities for Tactical Strike and just alpha striking enemies are, I don't say endless, but they're definitely pretty wide-ranging. Definitely a top-tier card, and one you're going to see played against you a lot in the current meta. If it's not a Vader list, it's probably an Iden list when you see Empire, so it's probably running this card. Last but certainly not least is Kallus. Now, I feel bad for Kallus. I want him to be good. I really do. The problem is that he's a niche character that doesn't actually do any of the things he wants to do well. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when we do unit breakdowns and unit ratings, but like, just be aware that like I feel like Kallus needs a little bit of help before I would give his cards significantly better ratings. As a result of that, Face Me is going into C tier. Face Me says that Agent Kallus gains Agile and Block. During Agent Kallus' activation, he can perform a free recovery. Enemy units cannot withdraw from him. So, basically the idea here is that you're going to start him off in gun form, and then he's going to flip to his staff form, and he's going to go melee something. That melee thing can't get away from him. The problem is this only works on melee units that aren't Jedi, and also largely assumes that they can't just beat him to death. Now, he will have a dodge or two, and which gives him block, which gives him surge to block, which is really nice, but yeah, he's a tar pit. He's not going to win those fights in most situations. And if it's a Jedi, his second part of his card doesn't do anything. They just push him away and walk away. I think any unit with disengage can also just leave, because I don't think their abilities count as withdraws at that point. So just overall, it's a very niche card that generally won't do anything. Next up is ISB Investigation. I actually think this card is S tier, and I don't think some people will agree with me on this, but ISB investigation basically translates to, you play this card, you say, I don't want you to play any 1 pips next turn, and your opponent can't play 1 pips next turn. It's really good. Because you can play mind games with your opponent in terms of like what they can play, what you're going to play, and I think that's just exceptional. So, very, very strong card. I just wish it was attached to a better chassis. I would use this card all day, every day. Like, I would love to see Kallus Palp work, where you just use their 2 pips to just disrupt the heck out of people. But they're just not there yet. Last but not least is Ruthless Tactics. Ruthless Tactics says, after an enemy unit defends against a ranged attack, he gains 1 observation token, or 2 observation tokens if it has a number of suppression tokens exceeding its courage value. During his activation, he may perform a free recover. So this is another card that lets him basically flip his staff into a gun, or gun into a staff if he needs to. But also, you get a bunch of observation tokens. The cool thing about this is that it can work on vehicles. They'll never get the double suppression or the double observation, but it's good for if you intend to focus down a target. So I'm gonna put it under B tier. Again, it's just attached to an awkward chassis. That's really its only problem. And so Kallus, just, I would love to see these cards. I mean, you can't get better than S tier, but like, I would love to see Face Me and Ruthless come up higher because Kallus is better. But at the moment, it's just not a thing. So yeah, that is the Rebel tier list, or not Rebel, wow, Imperial Commands tier list. I hope that you've enjoyed it. If you have any disagreements on some of my decisions, feel free to comment down below. Otherwise, you can look forward to the Separatist video, command video coming out tomorrow, and the Grand Army of the Republic video coming out on Thursday. So, yeah. Everyone, have a great day. Stay safe. Good night.